Good afternoon and welcome to the blab that I'm doing this afternoon with Maya, and it's on the launch of a new book which is entitled The Participant Principle, Getting the Best Recruitment of Qualitative Research. Now I had to shorten the title to fit it in, but welcome Maya.
Yeah. Thanks very much for having me back, Stephen.
You're more than welcome. It's always a pleasure to sit and chat. Now, how long have you been involved in market research?
Well, I've been involved with Saros now. It'll be 16 years this summer since we founded the business. Yeah. Saros is just 6 months older than my eldest daughter. Sort of awkward teenagers coming to maturity now and have changed a lot in that time.
Indeed. And has market research changed in that time too?
Well, our end of it, the recruitment end, most certainly has. I mean, yes, research has changed too in terms of what people expect from it, the tools and techniques in use. Ultimately, the aim of market research to understand what consumers want and give it to them and be able to inform brands how to meet those needs, that hasn't changed. But the way those questions are asked and answered and how the people are found to ask them, that's evolving all the time.
Yeah, now, I can understand that the companies and large companies undertake market research when they're launching new products, but who else would benefit from market research?
Well, if you're a small company with a small budget, arguably it's even more important that you target that correctly. And some of our clients are huge multinationals with big global strategies, but another time we might be working for somebody who's just developed a new app, their first ever product. Yeah. They want to bring it to market, but they have to do either some early exploratory work with people who might be in the target to find out what their needs are, or they might be doing something closer to launch to look at a nearly finished product, but they need to see what the usability issues are, whether there are any barriers to using it.
Yeah.
And find what they want easily. So we can be recruiting for quite small niche products or else very general consumer things, and they all have very different needs from the recruiter, of course.
Okay. Now, in terms of the book, the title, Participant Principle, where does that come from?
Well, it doesn't really come from anywhere specific. We've spent a lot of time in recruitment trying to move away from the word respondent to participant as the preferred way of describing the people who take part in research, because respondent has a very one-way feeling about it, rather than we like participant, particularly within qualitative research, because it's much more interactive and collaborative in nature. It suggests that they're giving the researcher something, the researcher is sort of responding to them, and it's much more interactive rather than answering a question. I ask, you respond, done deal, that's the end of it, and you gain no more feedback or insight from me. And I just get the answer to that question and I'm going to explore it and probe it. So participants is what it's all about. So that's what we wanted to focus researchers on. These aren't just faceless respondents, they're individual participants.
And it's that you want to get through that it's people that you're dealing with and people who want to be involved and want to help.
They do. They really want to help. I mean, they enjoy doing so. They tell us all the time, feedback we get is that people really gain a great deal from taking part in research. But that said, because research tools are now so widely accessible from a DIY point of view, and because of the changed business environment that we work in, that there are lots more very small businesses and solopreneurs making their own tools and apps, the people we actually do recruitment for, that has changed a lot in 16 years. It's fair to say that not everybody we recruit for has the typical CV of an experienced research executive who's apprenticed and been a junior on projects and really learned how to specify and buy recruitment and how to work well with members of the public as research participants.
So these people are coming cold to the market arena.
Well, it can be, yes. I mean, it's quite difficult when we get a request for quote. We don't immediately probe people's CVs to find out, do you know what you're doing? Will you work ethically and responsibly with the participants that we send you? We have to sound them out as we go along to an extent. And there are codes of practice within the industry. For example, we're company partners of the Market Research Society, and they're very, very clear about what you can and can't do with the participants in the name of research. But some people wanting to do research don't necessarily know that. We actually had to decline a project yesterday that would have required people to enter their live bank details in a beta application.
Yes.
Hang on. No, I don't think so.
No matter how much you trust people, there is certain information as a participant that you won't give away.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Market Research Society code says they have to be able to remain anonymous. So,
Right.
well, we won't take their names, just their bank details. And no, I don't think. Not to put into a test application that isn't even licensed for use yet. You know, there's absolutely no way we would recruit people to do that. So you can either replan the project with dummy data, and then we can find people to come in and test the application process. That's fine. Or you can think again, because we can't recruit that. So it's obviously those are examples of bad practice that could be damaging to participants. That's rare. Doesn't happen a lot. And to be honest, those are the people doing that are probably the last ones who are going to read the book, to be fair. So it's a little bit preaching to the choir, if you like. That's inevitable, I think. The people who do know what they're doing, I hope will still gain something from it, from looking at the challenges of recruitment from the recruiter's perspective, the things that we've heard from participants over the years that we think they should know, stuff we'd like to share with them and feedback, and the things that can make for better recruitment if we have those understandings in place from the start.
Right. So obviously when you're given a particular, what do you call it, a project?
Yeah.
When you take on a project, what sort of steps do you undertake, first of all?
Well, initially, our role is to understand exactly what it is that the researcher wants. From a logistical point of view, it's going to be 6 user tests or 10 focus groups or whatever on certain dates and locations. All of that's fairly easy to pin down, hopefully. Can't do a lot if it's not, to be honest. Then we need to find out exactly who they want to talk to, whether it might be people who are users of their brand. It might be people who are users of a competitor brand. It might be people who are lapsed users of their brand. It might be people who are in the target market for a brand, which could be defined as being in a certain age group or location or a kind type of behavior or an attitude profile, or it could be any complex interlocking combination of behaviors, attitudes, demographics, everything else on top. I mean, an example might be for somebody testing an app that they need to be a client of a particular bank, and they also need to have a certain mobile phone operating system.
Right. And
they're also looking for technological early adopters because they fit the profile of being likely to use this app. And they have to be in London next Thursday in hourly slots. So that's what we're working with typically. Yeah.
So getting the criteria right is important.
Yes, that's very, very important. And asking the questions in the right way so that they're not leading participants in any way towards, have you got a Vodafone mobile? Obviously tells people what the answer is. Instead, you have to ask which of the following networks is your mobile phone.
Yep.
Because there is, at the end of the day, there's a cash payment for people who go on to participate. Unthinkable as it might sound, there are people who would attempt to game the system and work themselves into projects that they're not strictly qualified for. So we do have to be very careful with how we present questions, that they're open, that if we have to ask about specific things, we can validate them. So we say we need people who drive a certain car. So great that you say that you do, but can you send us a quick photo of the logbook or something so that we can just make sure people are definitely whom they say they are. Right. And we screen them on the phone as well, make sure that they understand what they're getting into, what they're going to be asked, what their protections are under the codes of conduct, make sure that they can talk, because not everybody who can fill in an online form can actually have a conversation. So they need to be able to string a sentence together and respond to, we'll do more kind of imagination questions then. Depending on what they're going to be doing in the session itself. If they're looking at ads, we might ask them about visual things. Or if they're going to be looking at wireframes for an app that's not been built yet, then we need to make sure that they're quite good at thinking conceptually and ahead. Whereas other people are better at looking at something more concrete and picking it apart in a very detailed way. They'd be better for once the app's built, just before you launch it. Yeah. Come and just do a last minute check with it. So people's imaginations vary, and we have to test that thoroughly in recruitment. So otherwise, it won't be a good match on the night. It is like a dating agency, really. We want everybody to have a great time.
Participants with the actual project itself.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's not even matching with the researcher, because the next job they bring to us might need a very different kind of person. It really is about the specific research exercise that we're sending them into. We want them to have a great time, and we want the researcher to get great insight and contributions from them. And so we have to make sure we do that matchmaking. Absolutely.
So you're a bridge between the two.
Yes, we are.
Okay. And you make sure that the people who cross the bridge are the right ones.
Yeah, we don't kick them off to the trolls underneath or something. But the reason we wrote the book was we want to educate researchers, if you like, that there is quite a lot to what we do, that we can do our best work when they brief us and work with us in particular ways, because we want them to see the end participants as collaborators in the process. We also want them to see us as the recruiters, as the partner, and see that we can go back and say, well, we're not finding exactly what you want, but we're finding this instead, which is interesting, or these are the issues that are arising in recruitment, and what can we do about this? Or sometimes there are barriers we don't foresee, and we need to be able to have an open conversation about, rather than just find them, whatever. We'll find what's out there and take us back.
So the person whose project this will give you as much information as they can.
Yes, and obviously sometimes there are commercial sensitivities involved. I think that's one of the key things I emphasise in the book, that it's very hard to recruit with a bag over your head.
Okay.
You just get a list of bullet points or questions and answers that the perfect person must fit, then you could be missing a much bigger picture. And sometimes the researcher can't even tell us who their client is.
Okay.
It's not that sensitive, or they don't think that it would actually benefit the exercise to do so. So, sometimes we'll say, well, we'll sign your NDA, whatever it takes, we'll sign it in blood. Just please give us the big picture here, because otherwise, an example I use in the book is we recruited a project for a snack food supplier, some sort of high street takeaway. And we applied the criteria that we were given very strictly, so that we recruited against them. And it turned out to be for a well-known fried chicken outlet, which we were not aware of the name of. And it was about their family bucket products. And we recruited 2 vegetarians for that project who buy the family bucket every week because their family love it. And they sat there in the group and said, "What, actually eat it?" Do you know what's in that stuff? So very embarrassing all round, really. The client sitting behind the mirror, hearing all these environmentalists trash their products, which they wouldn't dream of eating. They felt awkward once they realised they were in the wrong room, really. They couldn't have nothing to say about it, and the kids like it, so I buy it. And the researcher was embarrassed. And so if they just said, "We can tell you who it's for, if you sign this NDA," then we'd have had that big picture. Yeah. And obviously, we would have screened out vegetarians or anybody who was negative about the fast food category or fried food and trans fats or whatever else they didn't want to be discussing that night.
So the more information the more open your customer can be, then the better you can build the research panel. Absolutely. If you just give us a list of questions, we'll work to that. But if we don't understand what would make a particularly good respondent, what would make a particularly bad one, what could blow up in your face on the night, we'd rather just be very straightforward about that. We've recruited for companies who've had PR issues, and sometimes, it's better just to screen out ahead of time anybody who's got strong environmental views if you're doing research for a company that's had reputation management issues in that field, for example, because you just don't want the discussion to go off at a tangent when our client is the poor researcher sitting there trying to manage this group. And if one person's got a very strong opinion that they're actually thinking, "This is my chance to tell them there what I think." Their agenda might be different. So we'd much rather screen those people out. Yeah, which is why it's important that the process is gone through, because you start off with a large database, don't you? We do, yes. We have a huge database, about 300,000 UK consumers that we have to screen from. So we hope for most samples that we're given that they're there. We can find them, we can drill down, and we can identify them somewhere. It's a case of filtering out the wrong people and then seeing who's left. And sometimes it's a case of getting real as well, saying, well, the key thing is that you want users of this very, very rare fragrance. So
rather than telling us you believe they're going to be women between 42 and 48 or so. Why don't you just leave it wide open? We'll go and find the people who've got it and let you know what the demographics fall out as afterwards, because it could be there's some niche group using it somewhere that you didn't expect. Sometimes it might be a product that the reason they think they know that age group is because of some survey they did 20 years ago. Things have changed. Maybe that cohort has aged and taken it with them. Maybe it's been adopted by some trend of much younger people or whatever. So we try whenever possible to focus on the behaviours rather than the demographics at the recruitment stage. Cast the net wide, so we'll find people who actually do what you want them to do, wherever they are.
When you get a project, do you get put together a team of people who immerse themselves in that project and take it from beginning to end?
Yes, I think the reason we all like working as an agency rather than a brand is the sheer variety of work that we get. And typically a project lasts a couple of weeks. Obviously there are people we work for regularly, but any phone call or email inquiry can immerse us in something completely new. Sometimes we need to do a little bit of Googling before we call them back. What on earth is this? Because we have to make a judgment call whether it's a viable recruit or not. A quick message around our Slack team saying, has anyone ever heard of this hotel chain? Or and there's a number of us dotted around the place with different backgrounds and experiences, and hopefully somebody will say, oh yes, that's a very popular game, it's just you don't know because you're not on Android or whatever. There'll be, otherwise if the whole team goes, nope, never heard of it, then we might have to look, then we try and Google penetration figures and things like that. So each project does involve you in having to become a little bit of an expert in that client's area for a short time. And of course, there are people we recruit for regularly who we build up much greater in-depth knowledge of their requirements, and they have a regular account manager who knows their stuff inside out, like our gaming specialist. I don't even know what he's talking about half the time. He has to do all the costings because I'm not a gamer. And he can say, oh, yeah, I know what they're after there. Brilliant, over to you. And he's got all the games and platforms and everything else. And he'll find out people who really are at the level that they say they are, and they're not just trying to impress, or they think that's what we want to hear. So we've got different people with different backgrounds and experiences who bring different things to Saros, really. We tend to recruit from outside the market research industry for our project managers. We feel that everything we do can be taught. But having the right attitude in terms of our customer service values and being able to work independently and just having a bit of sense and experience in life, those things can't be taught. So that's what we look for.
Yeah. So people bring them with them expertise, and that is then because you've got to, if you're recruiting a panel, you've got to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we do.
And that's part of the thing that well, if we just go through the areas that the book covers.
It ended up being quite big when I started writing it. I had no idea what to expect, really. I've written lots of content and articles over the years, a lot of it facing consumers about taking part in research and why they should, but I realised I put together quite a lot of stuff aimed at clients and researchers too, and I started to pull that together and work out where the gaps were. I suppose a lot of it is telling them what's realistic in recruitment and what isn't, what you can ask people to do, what you can't. We talk a lot about the codes of conduct and how they may or may not work with participants, which is something that we hope people broadly know. Market researchers obviously work with the whole of the MRS code, and they're very focused on things like whether the research is ethical and objective and robust, whether the findings can be cited and things like that, that the industry repute is high overall. So I focus very much on the participant elements, the anonymity, confidentiality, the fact they mustn't be harmed or disadvantaged in any way. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about the role of the recruiter in market research, because that's something which we're focused on changing to an extent. We want to see recruiters elevated to partners rather than passed over as suppliers.
Right, okay, so working with rather than...
Yes, obviously they're the client, they're paying, we want them to be happy, but we think we can best achieve that by aligning our values and objectives and understanding exactly what they're after and making sure they get that in the best way.
So for the term of the project, they will bring you into their team.
Yes, that's what we
You've
want.
got a voice on the inside.
Yeah, and hopefully longer term with the next job as well. We know what they're costing for and what they've got coming up. We can start aligning our database development with this huge project that they're pitching for in Scotland or whatever. So, you know, the people that we work with regularly, we have a very close dialogue with, and you can't jump straight into that with somebody new, understandably. But that is what we aim for, to truly be partners and to shift the role of recruitment. Recruitment in qualitative research in the UK doesn't have a great rep. I think there have been difficulties in the industry in the past. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine trying to actually do this job before there were databases and the internet?
No, it would have been a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, so it used to be these formidable ladies with clipboards who would go out and find people and remember people and have their little black books and so on.
Yep.
And there's some incredibly hardworking people, many of them are still going, doing excellent research using those traditional tools. But actually to do a lot of the projects we deliver that way, I just can't think how they do it. I really can't. If you couldn't pre-screen online in the way we do. We did a big project for an obesity product last year, for example. I mean, I couldn't imagine walking up to somebody with a clipboard. Excuse me. No. So
no.
The role of the recruiter is changing, both in business terms and in simple practical terms of what can be accomplished, how networks have changed. Mm-hmm. You know, the idea of being 6 handshakes from anybody if you can get them to pass your message on effectively, but not saying too much, not unblinding the actual answers to the questions, for example. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about how to work with and brief your recruiter, what we actually need when, because often there are very, very tight timescales involved in what we do. Typically, a project will only last 2 weeks from start to finish. Right. So that's 2 weeks from us hearing about it to having people sat in the room.
Yeah. But the targets have to be realistic, because I read in your book, which you've been publishing partly on LinkedIn, if you want to check it out there, that you've got to be realistic. You can't expect businessmen to turn up in central London at 4 o'clock on a certain afternoon.
Well, it's people, again, it's participants at the end of the day rather than inputs to a process. I think once researchers put that filter on it, it's all common sense, really. Of course, business people find it much more difficult to do stuff in the middle of the day. Put it on in the evening after work, much, much easier. You know, people, senior executives can't come and do something in 2 days' time. You have to get into their diary well ahead. If you're lucky. And, you know, there's parents and non-working people might well be able to do something during the day, but if a researcher says, well, I think we'll do the groups at 4, 6 and 8 so that we can get some non-working people. So 4 is actually a disaster for parents because that's school time.
It is, yeah.
Use common sense, do it at lunchtime, give them some sandwiches safely either side of the school run, and then do the groups for the working people after 6 o'clock. It will go much more smoothly. So those logistics are quite simple. There are other times we get asked to recruit when they haven't quite decided where the research is going to be yet. So that's all very well, but we have to know which city.
It does help, yes.
It might be that you haven't decided which viewing facility you're going to book, but you're waiting for them to get back to you. But at least if we know it's central Birmingham, we proceed on that basis, and we don't have to confirm the details for a couple of days.
Because then you can refine it down from your database to people who can get there.
Exactly. We'll invite people who've said that they're happy to travel to the centre of Birmingham, and there won't be any overlap between that and the people who said they can get to London. So, you know, we have to make sure we're long-listing the right people. There's a big section in the book about screening, and particularly the online screener that we use. What we actually send to people to invite them is such a fundamental tool. And if there are mistakes there, then the project is going to fall over at some point. We have to get the questions right and make sure that we're covering everything that people do want to see in the group, things that they don't, like vegetarians in a chicken group or whatever. So we need to make sure, without giving away anything that we shouldn't, we have to ask clear and ambiguous questions in a language that participants are familiar with.
Yes.
For example, in a medical project, you have to ask people about the way they would describe their own symptoms, not what the doctor calls it. Have you been diagnosed with hypertension? There are lots of people with blood pressure problems who wouldn't describe themselves that way. So you have to use phrases that people use, even if it might be very different from those that the client are using.
Right. So you're acting as an interpreter because you want.
Sometimes, yeah. We do actually insist in our terms of business that we must be supplied with documents in English, but that doesn't always happen, or some things have been a victim of translation software. Or even lost in translation. Like we had a very confusing project for an American client who wanted to do something about what they were calling holidays, and they meant Christmas.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Solely Christmas.
So completely changed the meaning of the whole questionnaire. and so, no, we're not talking about vacations. Okay. Lost in translation. We didn't think we needed to actually apply translation mindset to that particular one. So it just shows you how things can be ambiguous. Yeah.
So working with the client, using your expertise to get the questionnaire right in the first place.
Make it absolutely.
Takes away a lot of the heartache.
Yeah, that's the theory. By the time we don't want to waste our time or their time calling anybody who isn't a good fit, likely to be eligible. We keep some questions back to check on the phone, particularly the more imaginative and exploratory stuff. But on facts, we just want to be sure before we call them that they've got the right mobile phone or car or brand of shampoo or whatever it is that's the fundamental qualifier for the project itself. So we've got to get those questions right. So we've got to really pin it down. Even things like assumptions about what phrases like regularly or usually mean.
Often. Okay, yeah, go on.
You know, people might say, do you use this product regularly? So, well, yes, I buy that brand of sun care every year for my holidays. They mean once a year, regularly as clockwork, whereas the client might mean we want people to use it every few weeks.
Yeah.
Something like that. So we have to really drill down into what these woolly words mean. Try and write questions which cover facts. Like, so how often do you use the following product? Once a week, once a month, and give them a chance to tell us properly. So, yeah, it's all important.
Now, the final part of the participant's journey is actually taking part in research yourself, isn't it? Either in a meeting on their own, one-to-one, or in a group meeting. Or can you explain a bit more about how that should be handled?
Well, we will recruit for any legitimate ethical research activity in the UK. Okay. Not clinical trials, we don't inject things into people, but for any other kind of activity. And that could be anything from an individual interview taking place, maybe with a webcam or just an interviewer with talking one-to-one, up to the stereotypical group discussion of 8 people in a focus group, up to way bigger things. We've recruited citizens' juries of hundreds of people to sit and talk about public policy and things like that. So we try and make sure that we're very clear signalling to people throughout the application process what it is they're getting into. I think it's a bit difficult because we use the shorthand of focus group a lot in our participant-facing content strategy because everyone knows what that is. So yes, ours recruit focus groups, and we have had people who we've invited right through the whole process. We've said it's an individual interview, and they've still said when they got there, "Oh, I was really surprised I was the only one," because they just have this association. Sarah's means focus groups. I'm going to be sitting there with a bunch of other guys having a chat, and they're quite taken aback when they find they're in a room on their own. This camera pointed at them, and so we do our best to make sure people know what they're getting into. And sometimes it's more practical, unusual methodologies, like somebody might be going out with their mobile phone doing a video blog. We've sent disabled people out with webcams to video their journeys on public transport, for example. What are the physical barriers? It's actually really powerful when you see that from the disabled person's, literally from their point of view. How the hell am I supposed to get up? Just 2 steps there, but that wasn't on the website. But that's really powerful. And other times the research might be wholly online. We're seeing a lot more online qualitative research these days, which is brilliant. It used to be that qualitative meant face-to-face and quant could be done online, surveys and things. But now the tools are so good. I mean, I could imagine someone doing a depth interview on this platform, for example. Yes. Very easily you could record it we've got really clear two-way video and audio. So as a qualitative researcher, I can see and respond to your body language if I thought I could probe something you were saying or I thought you weren't saying. And I think that could be done really richly. And that means we can bring together people who might never take part in research in a traditional viewing facility, that they live too far from a venue or they're housebound or busy or whatever. So I think the potential for online qualitative is still emerging, and it's very exciting. But there are different recruitment issues there. I think, a lot of people think recruitment for online should somehow be cheaper or quicker. And actually, we would argue that it's even more important. When you're not meeting somebody face to face, you need to have greater confidence that they absolutely are who they say they are.
Oh, yes.
They have been very thoroughly qualified as to their eligibility to take part. I think online we all present lots of different aspects of our character, often in isolation. Your LinkedIn profile probably looks a bit different to your Facebook profile.
Indeed, yeah.
None of them are untrue, but they're just not the whole you. And if I met you face to face for an interview, I'd relate to you as a whole person and be able to see what bits were consistent and what weren't, and I wouldn't make judgments about you based on one narrow slice. Whereas if somebody recruits purely from Facebook or from an online panel without thoroughly interviewing somebody, you might not get that whole picture. So we're trying to encourage quite traditional recruitment methods to accompany the very latest cutting-edge online qualitative research methods to make sure the best of both worlds is captured.
I think that we can show a different part of ourselves on Facebook, another part on LinkedIn, another part on Twitter, and talking like we are today on Blab means that we get closer than we would do just texting each other.
Yes, absolutely, and it's great that we can do this, and it's something because we're all a remote working team at Saros. We tend to IM the whole time, and we're messaging each other all day about, has anyone heard from this guy, or what do we think about this job, or whatever. So we do that all the time, but we make sure twice a week we have a video conference and get everybody into a hangout, just for, even if it's only for half an hour, because you just can't really see the whole person unless you do that. It's only as good as the weakest broadband link in the room, and we do it till it freezes and falls over, which is less so nowadays. But it's really important to have that little bit of video. I think the picture speaks 1,000 words, then video is like 1,000,000. I
agree, because you can get a more in-depth appreciation of a person when you're talking to them over video. Because on video, even there's no hiding place. You have to be yourself and consistent. No, there is no hiding place.
It's funny though, and yet for me, this year has been so much oriented around this most old-fashioned way of conveying information, of writing a book.
Yeah,
it's astonishing that that's still important.
Very much so, isn't it? Yeah.
It's funny that if I could put that out as a series of blog articles or something else, and I may do one day, but it still wouldn't convey the credibility of printing it on sheets of paper somehow, having them professionally edited and published.
That's right. Yeah. But it's a testament to the quality of the service that you give, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, yes, I hope so. And I suppose people have different ways of wanting to absorb information. And I mean, it'll be on Kindle and everything else. In fact, I think that's just gone live today. So I tend to, certainly fiction I consume on Kindle exclusively nowadays, unless someone physically gives me a book. I buy business books because I like to have something.
There's nothing like having the book in your hand and turning the pages. You can't. If you're brought up doing that, then it's second nature, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm trying to wean myself into actually using the notes facility on the Kindle better. Using highlights and notes. I'm researching a paper at the moment for a conference later this year, and I'm all the books I've got are ebooks, and I'm just trying to make myself actually. It's actually very powerful, being able to highlight and note things and then extract that afterwards. Gosh, I had that when I was a student.
Indeed, my daughter-in-law was studying at university for 4 years, and she started off with a pile of books.
Yes.
And now it's all on Kindle, and she can carry it around. She carried it around with her while she got her degree. Totally amazing change in technology.
sent to the university library. So we had abstracts on some big disc system that you could get an appointment to use, and
yeah.
and then it had to order the actual papers to get sent. Now it would just all be a click away. Don't know they're born. Well, that makes me sound like a grumpy old woman, but
not so. It's just that we've had the joy of seeing all this technology arrive step by step.
And maybe we appreciate it more.
I think so. I'm
glad that I did get to publish an actual old-fashioned book, but I don't know, in another generation, will such a thing even...
I think so. We've got a situation now, what an analogy, vinyl's making a comeback.
Yes.
Yeah, and we thought that had gone. Vinyl records, we all threw our record players away, dance sets and what have you, and now they're coming back, and they're actually charging...
Yeah, nothing to play them on.
No, nothing to play them on, but they're actually charging 15 quid for an LP.
It's incredible.
Which, is shocking, really, but there just aren't enough record players around, as you say. We have to get a record player and join the revolution.
I suppose so. I find it quite interesting that my 16-year-old daughter is buying CDs.
Oh, yeah.
She wants to have the case and the lyrics and the photos and everything else, and I haven't music in non-digital form. For
something tangible, which is what your book is.
Yeah,
it's something tangible. You go, and when you go to the shows that you go to, then copies of the book there.
Yes, yeah.
Because it explains the industry. It explains your take on the industry.
Yeah, I took it with me to a conference last week, which was the QRCA, which is get this right, the Qualitative Research Consultants Association. They're a US-based organisation, but they're global membership, and they do an international conference once a year. So that was my deadline for getting the print done. And so I took it with me then, and it was great to distribute a load of copies to researchers who I know will take it away and give me feedback and will disseminate that learning.
Yes.
And it's already led to one training engagement coming up for people who know that their recruiters need to be doing things differently, and they're in a market we don't work in, but they think they would benefit from the ideas that we're presenting and looking at ways to incorporate that with their own team of recruiters. So that's really exciting. Saros is UK only at the moment. We haven't got plans to quite conquer the world yet. We want to finish the UK. But for now, it's great if our thoughts and experiences can go beyond in this pile of paper.
Yeah, it is. I congratulate you on publishing the book and wish you every success with it. And it's been a pleasure to talk for the last 40 minutes or so. And time just flies. It really is wonderful. Is there anything you'd like to say before we switch off the recording, just to close this session?
No, that's great. I see that you very kindly put the link in for the YouTube video, which just explains a little bit more about what we do at Saros and how the whole process works. It's several minutes long, so if anybody's really curious, they need to watch that, or pop along to sarosresearch.com. Whether you're somebody in the UK who might want to take part in research and share your views in an interesting range of projects, or if you're somebody who wants to do research in the UK, pop along there and have a chat to us.
Because you're always open to people joining you on your research database, so that you can actually... Yeah, I mean, new people joining daily, and
yeah, everybody's welcome. Anybody over 16 who's a UK resident, is very welcome to join us. There's no guarantees when we'll find the right project for you, but we firmly believe there's one out there for everybody.
Yeah. One day, it's an adventure. Yeah. And something you get involved in helping take a product or an idea or a service to market. And I can recommend being on the database. And when I qualify for one of your projects, I look forward to it.
We'll get you.
But I'm on the database. No rush. Right. Okay. It's been a pleasure, Maya, and I'm going to stop the recording now. And we hope to see you all on a blab later this year, when we'll plot the progress of the book and market research. Thank you for watching, and take care.
Bye.